What's your organizational change strategy? My name is Debbie, and I'm going to be guiding you through today's session. Um, we all know we're dealing with a lot of change, and I've been helping organizations for the last almost 20 years deal with different types of change they have going on in their organizations. And I have seen, oh my gosh, I would say I've seen every change strategy under the sun, but I will tell you, customers continue to surprise me in what they do and what they try to do to drive change. So today I would like to share with you some of those change strategies that I've seen over the years that may not actually be giving you the biggest ROI, and share some of those characteristics and then some tips and things that you can do about them and hopefully change those around as you move forward. So if we take a quick look at the agenda, first and foremost, it's important to understand why your approach to change is really relevant and really important for your results and for your organization. So we'll talk about that. And then, as I mentioned, we'll spend the rest of the time really focusing on some of those common change strategies, some of the risks of doing it a certain way. And I will just, flat out say there's no one right way and wrong way. I may pull up a strategy and say, here are some of the pitfalls or the risks, and you may raise your hand and you may say, well, look, that's the way we do it and it works for us. So, keep in mind, these are just my observations. There's no one right way or wrong way. I do want to just share with you some of those things that I've seen and some of the tips that, I've shared with customers that were able to get them kind of headed in a better direction. So hopefully we'll glean some insights and have some fun as we go along. You do have a questions area, so definitely keep those questions coming. I will glance over at them from time to time as we go through today and be answering your questions. So definitely keep those coming. Share your feedback, comments, anything like that is welcome. So the first thing I want to call out is everyone is dealing with a lot of change. This slide looked a lot different 6 months ago, right? As you can probably imagine, right? Right now, everything has changed. It's not just organizations rolling out new technology or reorganizing, moving to an open, modern workplace environment, but you're working from home and you're managing homeschooling and your kids and juggling your workout routine. And what does that look like? You're wearing masks, don't wear masks, wear masks, don't wear masks, no gatherings of more than 10 people. Oh, guess what? You can do gatherings of more than 10 people. Like, there's so much uncertainty going on. It's not just about our work life anymore, right? Organizations are really needing to take a different approach and a different look to how they manage change, because it's no longer within the four walls of their office building, right? The office building is now the world. It's within everyone's house, and our personal and professional lives are really blurred, right? It's no longer work-life balance. You're home in the morning, you go to work, and then you come back home. It's all one and the same. So everyone is dealing with a lot of change. Emotions are running high, and it's really important to be mindful and thoughtful about how you're approaching change, because there is so much that's happening in and around us. And honestly, it's probably not ending anytime soon. So we need to kind of think differently about how we approach it. Because the reality is, the way you approach change is either going to accelerate or impede your results, right? The headline kind of there says it all, right? There's lots of different things that are going on around us. And honestly, it's not really about what's changing, right? It's kind of the what, right? The work from home, the new technology, like the change. It's really about who is changing and what they need to change. It really comes down to the people. And honestly, changing is always a choice, right? People, you might not be able to change your circumstances, but you can absolutely control how you react to that change. And that's really what we want to try to get to today is, how do you get people to, even if they're not ready to react in a positive way, how do you at least alleviate some of that resistance, right? How do you get them to kind of come down a little bit from their emotional roller coaster and be open to adapting to that change? And I will tell you something, pushing people to change, which I see all the time, right? It rarely works. Who wants to be told what to do, right? It's really about bringing them along, letting them know, here's the value to you. Here's why you should want to do this, and allowing them to make it feel like it's their choice to make that change. And, I've seen it time and time again where organizations, they push people. It's the change is not an option, deploy it and they will come. I mean, you name it. I've seen it throughout the years. And almost every single time I've seen it cost that organization more time, more money, resources, because they're spending so much time now dealing with the resistance and the pushback. They're spending more money after the fact trying to get people to want to change, or they're dealing with churn because people get so frustrated, they leave the organization, and now the organization has to try to deal with replacing that talent. So keep in mind, I tell organizations, one way or another, you're going to have to deal with the people side of change, and you can do it right the first time, or you can, spend twice as much time and money doing it after the fact. So keep in mind, the approach that your organization takes is really going to impact and influence your results. So as we talked about just a second ago, it's not really about what's changing, it's about who is changing. And I'm putting up some statistics up on your slide here that you can read through. I'm not going to read through all of these, but as you can see, almost 3/4 of business transformations and business change initiatives fail to receive and achieve the results that they're setting out to do. And most of the reasons why all ties back to people. It ties back to the cultural impact, it ties back to employee resistance, employee engagement or lack thereof, leadership involvement. But organizations who have taken the time up front to do a correct change management strategy have received, 143% of their expected ROI. That's amazing. So again, there's statistics out there. It's not just me saying what I think is the right way or wrong way. There's statistics that people are proving having that people change strategy is really going to make or break your user experience. So let's jump right into it and let's talk about some of these common change strategies. One of the things you'll see as we go through today is I love to use analogies. And for those that have worked with me, I see some familiar names on our attendance list today. I use analogies all the time. It really helps make things relatable. So hopefully, and it adds a little fun to the presentation as well. So hopefully you'll be able to relate to some of the tactics I'll talk about. So the first one, the fad diet, right? We're all familiar with the fad diet. We see commercials for them all the time, right? Take this one pill, do this one thing, just eat cabbage, right? We've seen it time and time again. And we all know the kind of the common denominators here, right? A fad diet, it's about getting a really quick fix, getting fast results by making a minimal investment. Like you don't need to work out and you can gain muscle, right? And in the background, I know you're seeing some of those types of fad diets, cabbage soup diet, banana diet. These are actual real diets. And there's one that's called the werewolf diet, the tapeworm diet. I mean, oh my gosh, it's crazy what's out there. But anyway, you kind of get the idea of a fad diet, right? It's about going hard, going fast, and being able to not really put a lot of effort into it, but really seeing some of the results. So when we think about how this plays out in an organization, this is about focusing on those really big initiatives and wanting quick wins, wanting fast results. And when you don't get those results, this is the big part of it. When you don't get those results, you just keep changing it up, right? Thinking, let's throw this to the wall and see what sticks. Oh, that didn't work. Let's throw this other thing to the wall and see what sticks. I will tell you, companies that I've worked for in the past have done this every few months. It wasn't every few weeks, it was every few months, but it was still like they test something out, and if they don't see these hard and fast and sustained results, they move on to something else and they move on to something else, right? So I think we can all relate to that, right? It's kind of change it, change it, change it. And what they expect to see first and foremost is that, well, everyone's going to jump on board because there's really, not that much they have to do. And, we're going to see all these big changes and we're going to see them fast and we're going to see them sustained. Now, we all know what happens with a fad diet, right? You might see those fast results, but what happens, over time? If you're doing a fad diet to lose some weight, what usually happens, right? You lose the weight, but then you gain it back. And if not, you gain back even more, right, than you've lost to begin with. So the reality of what actually happens, first and foremost, there's some mismatched, if I could speak, expectations, right? people need time to adapt to change. And when you're throwing change on top of change on top of change, really takes a while for users to adapt to what's going on. And before they even have a chance to settle in, you're changing something else. And they just feel like they're in this constant state of flux and change and uncertainty. And you end up getting this roller coaster effect, right? Everyone's familiar with the roller coaster. It goes up, 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 and then what happens? It comes crashing down. So you get those false positives where you think it's working and then all of a sudden it drops off. So then you think, well, let's change it and try something else, right? And so that type of approach, that fad diet, usually doesn't work when you're trying to drive big and sustained results in your organization. So some of the things that you can do instead. So if you're thinking, whoop, that's my organization, just like a fad diet, it's really about a lifestyle change instead of a quick fix. And I know it takes time. And I know that usually executives and IT pros, they're not really patient people, right? They don't like to take all of that time. So work with them, help them define their big long-term vision. Like, what is it we're really trying to do? Right? Just like if you're trying to run a marathon, you don't get up on day one and run 26.2 miles, right? You train and you kind of have a short-term goals of, today I'm just going to run a 5K. Today I'm going to try to walk around the block, right? You build up that momentum. So you still set those big visions, but then you work on those short-term scope or goals. And when you can set those measurable milestones along the way, your leadership team gets to see, hey, we're making progress. We're getting to see results. And they can see it building and building and building. And that is really what is able to get your organization to sustain the results that you're trying to see. So it's more of a gradual incline versus that roller coaster that comes up and crashing back down. And really important, you have to make sure you're planning for these ebbs and flows. And what do I mean by that? So I worked with a company who they were based in the United States, but they worked a lot with companies in Europe. And they rolled out this new technology that allowed them to collaborate with this company. And then December rolled around. So they started in, it was like September, October, and usage was great and everyone was collaborating. And then they started looking at usage in December and their usage dropped off. And they freaked out and they said, oh my gosh, this technology, it's not working anymore. What's happening? Why aren't people using it? And we finally had to get them to realize that it's December. A lot of Europe, it shuts down. They're all on holiday for a month, right? So again, those ebbs and flows are a normal way of working. So it's really important to understand those, right? A lot of companies, overseas or around the world, they take a lot of vacations during the summer. If you're in the educational sector and you're looking at making a big change and then you say, well, hey, how come no one's using this technology? If it's the summer and people are out of school, you wouldn't expect them to be using technology. So it's really about understanding when you should expect those ebbs and flows to plan ahead. So again, celebrate those small wins along the way and then set those big long-term visions are really going to help you get there versus those hard and fast, change it up every couple of weeks, which kind of leaves everybody in this state of kind of unsettled uncertainty. All right, let's look at the next one. Everything but the kitchen sink, right? We've all heard this phrase before, right? You're, changing everything but the kitchen sink. So if we look at this one, this is one of my favorite ones. I see this a lot. I talk to customers and I say, great, what are you changing? How much is changing? What else is going on in your organization? And the list is endless. Like, oh, we're upgrading to Windows 10. We're rolling out this new technology. We have to get new phones because no one's in the office for to look at their desk phones anymore. So now they're working from home. But unfortunately, because of the state of the state, we had to go through some furloughs and layoffs, and we're changing our corporate policies and how people work. And I mean, the list just goes on and on and on. And they're trying to change this all on day one, right? Now, think about that. If people push back on one change, if you think, they're resistors, they're laggards, they don't like change. Well, now what happens if you're trying to change on top of change on top of change, right? It's, think about this way. Someone sets out a goal to lose, they want to lose some weight, they want to get in shape. And you say, great, on day one, you go start working out at the gym and doing cardio and getting rid of every food in your kitchen and replacing all of your cookies with fruit. And you're changing way too much that your mind is just like, nope, never mind, I can't do it. So the kitchen sink is really about changing a lot at once. And there's two ways this can play out. One is when organizations combine all of those changes into one, right? They just say, we're just going to pile it all on. We're just going to do one change. Or they spread it out, but they deliver change after change after change, where it just seems like you're in this constant state of flux with so much going on. And what they expect to see, and I've heard this before, is they said, well, it's going to be easier for our users because they only have to change once. And I said, it's not the fact that they have to change once, but they're changing 10 things at once, right? So while they think it's minimizing disruption, it's actually causing a lot more angst and emotional trauma for those users when they have so much to change at once. And then organizations will tell me, well, I have this project team, so I need to pile on all the work for them so that they can get all the change done at the same time, right? They think it's going to save them time, money, resources by being able to implement and deploy all of those changes at once. And as we looked at in the prior example, when you're not changing the right way, it actually costs you more time, money, and resources. So again, while the expectation is that we're going to save time and money, in the long run, it may actually be costing you more. So what actually happens here? Right, first and foremost, change overload. Right, people are like, oh my gosh, it's too much change, and they push back. As a result, you start seeing lost productivity because they're trying to juggle all of these changes at once. People are not happy. They're saying, you know what, we need more time. I don't like this change. And then you're dealing with all of that pushback. So what can you do about this scenario, right? Because I see this a lot too. And it, especially right now when there's so much uncertainty and so much change going on. So this is really a great opportunity for users to see the bigger picture of why you're making the change, because it's not so much about all the little things that are changing, it's about why. Why are you making all of those changes? So the first thing I invite you to do is create a theme or a brand, and let me explain what that means. So I worked with an organization who, this was last year, and what, they said, we have all of these changes, right? We're going full on digital transformation. Like we really want to, come into the 21st century with, all of the right technology. But they also understood they didn't want to do change overload for users, but they said we have to keep the momentum going. So to balance that all out, they wanted to take users' mind off of the change itself. So they created this brand or this theme that was called Innovate 2020. And they said, by the year 2020, we want to be the best in breed in our industry. We want to gain market share. We want to double our capacity in our organization. We want, all of you to have growth opportunities. We really value your time and your contributions to this organization, but we can't do it without you. Right? We can't succeed without each and every one of you. So again, they brought it back to the people and they said, we're in this together and we're a team. Like we either win as a team or fail as a team, but we have to be in this together. Are you with us? And everyone got so excited, like, hey, the organization values me. And yeah, I want to see this organization grow. I love the vision. I want to see this vision play out. And then they said, great, in order for us to get there, we need to make some changes. So you're going to see, it's like a construction zone, like a little bit happening at a time, but it's going to be continual so that we can see the big house, the final product at the end. And everyone said, great, I get it. So they communicated early. They let users know what was going on. They brought them along on the journey. Users felt like it was their decision to change and come along. Throughout the year, they kept reiterating that vision and coming back to it and saying, look at all the progress we're making. Again, think about it. You're building a house, right? It kind of starts off with nothing and you're thinking, oh my gosh, a few months of this construction zone, but then you see the walls going up and you see the plumbing, being laid down, and all of a sudden you see the siding going on at the, on the outside, and it starts all coming together. And that's really what this organization was able to do. They supported users. They let them know, look, we get it. It's going to be challenging and frustrating. Things are going to happen, but we're here together. And that was it. It was building a team. it was supporting users, it was communicating early, and it was creating and kind of bundling that all of those changes around a theme or a brand. So if you continually find yourself in a spot where there's so much change going on and so much happening around your organization, especially now, I encourage you to create a theme or a brand, um, let users know early, and it's always focusing on the value to the user, right? Why would they want to change? And this organization, they didn't focus on everything that was changing. They focused on the bigger picture. They focused on what was in it for the user. And that is what really generated that user excitement. So again, if you find yourself in that everything but the kitchen sink type of approach, you know what? You try some of these tactics and see if that kind of drives the message forward. All right, the next one, the used car salesman. We are all familiar with a used car salesman. All right, so this is another one. This is one I hear a lot. I would say this is probably the most popular one that I see in organizations, right? Think about what you hear from a used car salesman, right? And you think about that from an organizational perspective, like, hey, we're making this change. It's going to really increase your productivity. It's going to save our organization so much money. It's really it's this safe and secure solution. Not one of those statements is of value to your end user. Those are all value statements to that car salesman, right? Or in this case, your BDM, your business decision maker, or your IT pro, right? So when you're thinking about, right, you go to buy a car, and if you get that salesy, sketchy type of person that's just trying to really sell you on something, it's usually about really what's in it for them, not what's in it for you as the buyer. So in this case, your user is the buyer. Your user has to buy into the change. So using sales phrases and tactics and positioning statements that are really more targeted at the business decision maker are not going to get you the results you think you're going to get, right? What user wants to hear they're not being productive enough? Like, hey, we're moving to this because it'll increase your productivity, or we're moving to this new technology because it's really safe and it's really secure. You know what? If anyone out there is familiar with the term shadow IT, right? You roll out a new technology, shadow IT, and what was the last statistic I read? I think it was up to 80% of users admit to just bringing their own technology into the workplace. They're like, nah, I don't like the technology my company used, so I'm just going to bring my own. So do you think that security and safety is really top of their mind? Probably not. So again, when you're thinking about this, thinking about really what your positioning and your messaging is. So when I see this play out in an organization, it's usually, as I mentioned, the focus is on the value to the stakeholder. In this case, the executive or decision maker, IT, sometimes it's marketing, right? Those flashy, gimmicky marketing campaigns that you see all the time, users see right through that, right? So it's all these kind of empty promises of, what do I have to do to get you in this car today? It's, how do we get you using this technology? And it's so great and everyone wants to do it. And, it's kind of that flashy, gimmicky kind of sales process that you go through. And you're expecting users to be as excited about it because you are, right? You're generating all this excitement. But the reason you, and in this case, when I say you, I mean your business decision maker, your marketing team, the reason they're excited is because they're seeing the value for them. So of course, right? When you see the value to you, you get really excited about something. So just because they're super excited about it, they see or they think that users are going to be just as excited as well. And then they're expecting this proactive and really fast adoption and adapting to the change, and that people will just go along with it because why wouldn't they, right? It's the greatest car ever, right? It's the greatest change ever. Why wouldn't they? But in turn, what really happens, people, you know, you underestimate what your employees, are really all about. And they can smell that phony sales pitch a mile away, right? They're looking at the WIFM, which is what's in it for me, if you're not familiar with that acronym. And you know what? They're like, look, that's nothing about us, right? They feel undervalued. I hear that all the time. When I work with companies, I love to interview end users. It's not just about me listening to what your BDM or your IT wants. It's really about understanding what is the user sentiment and user perspective. And I can't tell you how many times users say they feel undervalued. And that is why people leave an organization. one of the reasons why people leave an organization. And what happens when they leave? Then you're spending all that time and money and resources trying to replace that talent, which costs you a lot more than had you really focused on keeping and retaining that top talent to begin with. So when you have this phony sales pitch, right, people, they don't buy into it. It's going to be that much harder to drive the change. User satisfaction is going to drop, productivity is going to drop. People feel like had someone say, I just feel like I'm just a cog in their big machine, like I'm a number, and I don't matter, because it's all about, how they can save more money, and how, they just want me, to push the buttons, much faster. So again, the used car salesman approach, I see it a lot. And I don't think people mean to do it that way. I just think it's right. Everyone, when you're driving people to change, you obviously get excited about something because it's of value to you, right? So let's say, for example, a new restaurant opened up in town and I just loved it. It was my, favorite dish that they made, and it tasted so good and the staff was always great. So I tell all of my friends, like, oh my gosh, you have to go try this restaurant. It's the greatest thing ever and you're going to love the staff. What if they don't like that type of food? Right? That means they may not like that restaurant just because I do, but I get excited about it because it's something that I enjoy and it makes me feel good, right? In the end, people make decisions based on how it makes them feel. So if it's something that makes me feel good, I get excited and I try to push that on other people. So I don't think your executives or IT pros are doing things maliciously or, to cause lack of intent, but it's just the approach that they take because they're excited about something. They think the users are going to be excited about it as well. So it's really about flipping that and saying, well, it's not just what's in it for me as an executive or business decision maker. It's how do I get users excited about it? And it's how do I drive that intent from the people change perspective. So I like to say what I call this outside in versus inside out approach. So inside out is kind of the example I just gave of what's in it, right? Inside is me and pushing my intentions outward, right? So I like this, so you should like it too. An outside in approach is what does everyone else care about, right? And then I pull it into me and say, okay, how can I relate to that? That's going to make it effective when I communicate to them. So the way to do that is really to approach the change from the user point of view. Make sure people have a desire, right? A want to change. And then just like the last example where I said communicate early, I can't say that enough. Organizations, I find, they don't want to confuse users. They don't want to, stir the pot too early. So they wait until the last possible minute to communicate about what's happening, about what's changing. And then users think, oh my gosh, this is now all changing so fast. Everything's happening so fast, even though you've been planning the change for 6 months. So engage users early. People, we're human beings. We need time to adapt, to assimilate, to digest the change, to work through it in our minds. So when you engage users early, when you communicate throughout and support them through the change, when you really take time to listen. So if you engage them early and communicate and say, let us know if you have any questions. Give us some feedback about what you're thinking. It allows you time over those 6 months or however long you're planning the change to think through everything so that users don't feel like they're being pushed at the last minute. So this allows you to have the right approach when you're building your user readiness plan. And user readiness is not just training. I see that a lot. Well, we'll just push some training. We'll communicate, email with a link to training. Everyone will be good. User readiness and preparedness is really about your awareness, training, and support strategy. And it's all, again, approaching it from the user perspective. That's going to help you optimize user reception and adaption of the change more quickly. So the awareness includes that value, the what's in it for me, communicate early, training, make sure when you're thinking of a training strategy, it's not just a one size fits all. Really understand your user culture and how users learn, right? Maybe not everyone learns by a video. I personally am a kinesthetic learner. I have to get my hands on the keyboard, or if there's a new process, I have to test it out a couple of times. That's how I learn best. I've worked with people over the years that say, look, I can just watch a video. That's how my brain retains information. So leverage a variety of different ways to communicate and train your users, and then make sure they feel supported. Make sure your support desk or your champions can help those users when they need help, right? Because users want to feel like if I have a question, there's someone I can go to that's going to know how to help me. So again, that used car salesman approach, these are just some tactics. It's really about approaching it from the user point of view, not the decision maker point of view. All right, the next one. The next one's actually a good one. New Year's resolution, right? We're all familiar with making New Year's resolutions. And then, what happens when you have this New Year's resolution approach, right? In this case, everyone is excited to change, right? Everyone, January 1st, everyone is gung-ho to make all of these changes in their lives, these positive things. They're ready to change. They're ready to get started. They have everything they need, and they know exactly what they need to do. Right? So this is a good thing, right? It's a good thing to have your end users on board. It means you did something right? It means that your organization got everyone super excited about the change, right? So that you did all of your due diligence, right? You did your persona analysis, you understand your users, you implemented that communication and training and support plan, right? That user readiness strategy. You have resources to really help everyone through the launch, right? You say, great, January 1st, we're launching this change, be ready for it. And everyone gets super excited, right? So what's wrong with this scenario, right? You're probably thinking, well, it sounds good, right? So what's wrong here, right? So first and foremost, what do you expect to happen, right? Well, you expect minimal resistance because you did everything you should do, right? You're going to get that user buy-in. But here's the kicker. You're expecting that just because you have that initial momentum, that it's going to sustain, right? And what happens when we all make New Year's resolutions, right? I know, like, usually the month of January, all of your gyms are full of people. And then what happens by February, March? The gyms are empty again, right? People who set out to, only eat salads and lettuce, for the month of January, what happens? Oh, guess what? It's Valentine's Day and I'm going to eat an entire box of chocolate. So, right, user momentum typically doesn't just sustain because they got all excited to make this change up front. So, what actually happens, right? Old habits die hard. It is very hard to change a habit. That is one of the reasons why, even though we have good intentions, it's so easy to revert back to old ways of working. What you did before, right? So your New Year's resolution started off with a bang. January was great, rolled into February, and then things started, going sideways. And this is one of those areas where I see shadow IT a lot, where you make this drastic change, users get really excited about it, but then you kind of leave them to their own accord to figure it out moving forward. You say, great, we're going to have these floor walkers and champions and everyone to get going, but then everyone moves on to other projects. And you just expect users to just keep going on their own. And this can lead you to some false positives, meaning you think you have all this momentum, right? But it's not sustained. And then you start seeing that dip again, right? That kind of that similar to a roller coaster, right? Where, everything was really good and then it starts dying down. It may not dip as far as that first example of the fad diet, but it kind of tapers off. It doesn't keep going up. It kind of tapers off, drops a little bit, drops a little bit. You might start seeing some shadow IT of other technologies seeping in because users are trying to figure things out on their own and they're left to their own accord to try to kind of say what's what. Like, how do I keep this going? Like, oh, I don't know how to do this on my own. So what are some of the things that you can do if that's your organization? And this is really common. I would say this is probably the most common one where I see in companies who do invest the time and the resources up front, they fail to implement an operational plan, which is really the biggest thing that you can do here. Have an operational plan of what's going to happen in the weeks and months following the launch of the change, right? First and foremost, engage peer champions. That is an easy thing to do, and they are going to help be your support system. They can help with communications, with questions, driving support from end users, building community. They can help keep it going. And research has shown that users like to listen to their peers. They're more likely to ask questions and go to their peers if they're confused or concerned about something than they are to go to their manager and say, I don't know how to do this, or I don't feel supported. Right? They're much more likely to confide in their peers. So engaging a peer champions community is such a great way to help evangelize the change and sustain results. So find those early adopters, find those people that are really adapting to that change. Or maybe if you can't support your entire user base, build a champions community and really give those subset of users a lot of support so that they in turn can go help continue to support your users. And make sure you're highlighting successes. This is a great way to do it. Every month, I encourage companies to put out a blog or a post or a newsletter that, highlights how people are adapting to the change, what they're doing really well, or, how they succeeded in a certain way. So I had a company once, they deployed a new technology and their sales team, it's kind of relevant today, their sales team was used to traveling all the time, right, to close sales. And they launched this new online technology, and their typical sales cycle, I think it was like 8 weeks or something like that. And obviously sales reps are based on, how much I can sell and how fast I can sell and how much I can sell. So one of the sales reps said, I'm going to use this new technology and see if I can close our sales cycle a little bit faster. So what they did is they started using the technology to meet online. And a couple of weeks later, they came back and they said, I was just able to close a sale in 6 weeks versus 8 weeks, 25% faster. Which is awesome. And all the other sales reps said, oh my gosh, if you can do it in 6, I'm going to do it in 5. Like, it started this kind of friendly competition, but they were able to highlight how people were using technology or the change to drive results, which then inspired other people. So when peers can learn from peers, it makes such a big difference. It's not about you going to your users and saying, hey, we just saved $5 million by moving to this technology. Nobody cares about that. You know what? You're not giving them a raise in their paycheck because you saved money. What's in it for the user? Show them how they can get their jobs done. Any way you can make a user's jobs easier, faster, more efficient, are really going to help you accelerate the change and sustain that momentum because users get excited. It's kind of about that shiny object, right? We're all excited about these new, silver objects that come our way. So highlight that. And then really important, gather feedback. This is a big one. It only takes a short amount of time to create a user survey, send it out, gather feedback. Like, hey, it's been a few weeks since we rolled this technology out or made this change. We're working from home. We've been doing it for 3 months now. And if you have not sent a survey to check in with your users about how they're adapting to that, do it. Hey, we know, there's a lot going on. Wanted to check in. How are you doing working from home right now? What can we do to better support you? All users want to do a lot of the time is just know that their voices are heard. Even if they ask for something and you say no, if you give them a no, but here's why, or here's something else we can do instead, or just open up that conversation, users feel supported. So the answer doesn't always have to be yes when users ask for something or give feedback. I feel like organizations are always hesitant because they don't want the feedback from users. It's okay if users say, we're looking for this and you have to say no, or here's what we're working on instead. It just keeps those lines of conversation open. We're going to move on to the next one, which is our last one, which is the tip of the iceberg. So very often I get asked, like, why did you name your company Iceberg Consulting Services? Like, that sounds really weird. How is that related to change management? So from a change perspective, there is actually a change iceberg approach. And really it talks about how 90% of your organization's impact is what's below the surface, just like an iceberg, right? You can only see the very tip of the iceberg. You can only see that top 10%, but really the biggest impact, right, is what you can't see. But I see a lot of the time organizations are always focused on those hard facts, the top 10%, right? It's the hardware, it's the data, it's the telemetry, it's the things, it's the money, it's the things that you can very easily see and measure, right? If you can't measure something, then they think, well, it's not valuable, right? So it's the qualitative versus qualitative, subjective versus objective type of measurements. But really, as we mentioned earlier, it's not about, the what, it's about the who. And the who is that 90% that's underneath the surface. It's your people, it's your employees, it's your culture, it's their attitude towards change, it's your user satisfaction, right? It's the emotions that really drive your organization's success. Because honestly, you can deploy all the technology and make all the changes in the world, but if your people don't adapt to those changes and don't use the technology, all of that work was for nothing, right? And your people, your employees, they are the ones who are going out and talking to customers. They are the ones going and helping your consumers and your customers and building relationships and doing the marketing work. All of that is all the people behind the curtain. So you really need to take time to focus on that 90% of what's driving your organization's success. So this is, what I see typically playing out, right? People are so focused on what's changing, right? It's a process. Oh, we're rolling out this new process. We're rolling out this new technology. We have to just furlough all these people, and they don't think about the emotional aspect. They don't think about who this is impacting and what that impact means. When they run a change and they run a test of it or a pilot, they usually run that pilot just out of IT, right? And IT, they're a technical, they're a technical bunch, and they do adapt to technology changes and other changes more quickly, typically because they're the ones driving the change. So to them, they said, well, we ran a pilot out of IT. IT thought it was easy to use. Great. We're ready to go. Everyone else will just, I love this word, automagically. Everyone else will just automatically change, right? We're just going to push it and they'll do it because IT said it will work. So here's what you expect. You're really thinking that your IT experience is representative of your broader user base. And, I think we all know that's usually not the case. IT is not representative of someone who's, sitting in HR trying to do phone interviews, hiring new employees or onboarding new employees or creating marketing campaigns. Right? They're not, a lot of the times they're not as tech savvy, nor do they have the bandwidth and the time to learn all this new technology or make all these process changes. I think from a technical perspective, a lot of it's on or off, right? You deploy a technology, you push it, you flip a feature, it's on or it's off. People are not on or off, right? Sometimes we want them to be, but people are not on or off. There's a whole gray area in between, right? So it's, I like to say, technology, or a process, if you're deploying just a new process or making a change, it's programmed to act, right? However you program it, it's going to act. It's going to do exactly what you tell it to do. People are programmed to react. So whatever change you push their way, they're going to react to it. You have to be prepared for all those different reactions. So simply saying IT is representative of the user base, not so relevant. Assuming that you can just point to training and say, well, that's all people need. As long as they know how to do it, they'll be good. But if they don't understand why, or what's in it for them, or what the end results are, if they don't have any goals to target, training is not going to get you the results. Think about it this way. And I love using, as you can tell, like the health analogy of the gyms and the, New Year's resolutions and things like that. So let's say a new gym opened up and I'm like, oh, I want to check this gym out. And if I just walk in and a manager comes up to me and says, great, let me show you how to use all these machines. Right? He's training me on how to use all these different machines. If I don't understand why I would use those machines, if they're not aligned with my goals, right? And if they're, complicated to use or, just training me on the machines once, and then I come back the next time on my own, I'm looking at all these machines going, well, which one do I use? And when do I use it? And how do I use it? And how many reps should I do? And what weight should I use? And, why would I be using this weight if I'm trying to do this? And so simply training someone on something is not going to get you the results that you want. And also using telemetry alone is not going to give you the right information to either drop a plan or measure results. Right? Telemetry only gets you so far because again, there's a subjective versus an objective, right? I always say when you're measuring success, you want to have both qualitative and quantitative. Quantitative is absolutely important, right? You want to get those hard facts, but the qualitative is just as important. how are people feeling about the change? Are they happy? If they're not using it, why aren't they using it? Don't use telemetry to get those results. I'm just checking the time here. I had a company once who said, well, no one's using this new technology we deployed. It has to be because of technical issues, right? Again, they were in IT, so they assumed if people aren't using it, it has to be something that they were familiar with, which was the technical side of the house. And I said, you know what, let's not assume that it's technical issues. So I created a user survey and we interviewed users. We sent out the survey, we started interviewing users, and we asked them, we said, how often are you using this technology? And if you're not using it, help us understand why. And we gave them a bunch of choices, right? Like, oh, I'm having some technical issues, or I already have another tool I use for that. I don't know why I would switch. I love this other tool. Or I didn't know it could do those things. Or, well, I don't really have time right now to learn another tool. So we kind of gave them all of these options. And I will tell you, not one answer came back that it was a technical issue. Not one. Most people said, I had no idea that that technology could do all those things, right? That's awareness. Some people said, I think I need more training. Like the training I got wasn't sufficient. There's training. People said, well, I called the help desk because I had some questions and the help desk had no idea how to help me, right? So that gave us a lot of insight in what we needed to fix. And every answer came back to awareness, training, or support, right? Which is our user readiness plan. They went under the assumption, well, we push it out, people will figure it out, right? Again, IT representative of the typical end user, and it wasn't the case. And by using that qualitative type of survey, it gave us a lot of insight into why people weren't using it, and we were able to go course correct. So using telemetry, is not just going to be enough. So make sure you're thinking qualitative and quantitative. Because here's what's happening, right? People know that you don't have a lot of empathy for what they're going through, right? People don't feel like you care about them, right? Again, it's that cog in the machine type of thing. That's why they resist change, right? So you're getting a low ROI because all you're focusing on is the technology or the process, or I have organizations, not right now because I know everyone's in a different workspace of working from home, but in the past, 6 months ago, they were saying like, hey, we're moving from closed door offices to this big open office environment. And they didn't really consider the fact that 80% of their employees were on the phone for 8 hours a day, and that they used speaker phones because nobody wants to wear a headset or have their head like this, tilted with a handset on their shoulder for 8 hours a day. And now people are thinking, well, now I'm in this open office space, so I can't use a speaker phone, I can't close my door, I don't want to wear this headset. So they didn't really consider the user experience. So again, it's that lack of empathy for what the user is really going to go through. And again, you can see back to that more time, money, and resources. There's some consistent themes across all of these change strategies, right? They were dealing with a lot of resistance because when you're just focused on the what's changing and not who, eventually you will have to deal with the who, right? And again, that's going to cost you more down the road. So you really need to think through that approach if your organization is really focused just on that top 10% of that iceberg. So really make sure you're focusing on the people side of change. Plan for user readiness in alignment with the change itself. So whether it's a technical change or process change, don't wait until the change is ready for users. As you're planning, saying, hey, we're going to be moving, we're going to be shifting, we're going to be making these changes in our organization. Here's why. Again, it's kind of building that momentum, building that user readiness, planning for it in alignment with the other changes, not after the fact. That's the other thing I see happening all the time. They have this big long cycle, 6 months, 8 months of we're planning for this change. And then here is this little time, okay, we launched the change, now everyone needs to go do it, right? They should be overlapping. And really, walk a mile in your user's shoes, understand what the change means to them, do that user survey up front, ask them those questions, check in with the users after the fact, understand how they're feeling about the change, if they're not using or they're hesitant to adhere to the new process or use the new technology, whatever the change is, understand what it means for them. And then make sure you're adapting to the appropriate readiness activities. Honestly, for some changes, maybe all you need is a link, an email with a link to training. Your readiness plan should really align with the change that you're making and the depth of the change that you're making. How big of a change? Like, how much impact does this truly represent to your users? So you really need to think through some of those things. And now there's that whole extra layer that you want to accommodate because, right, it's now everybody's working from home. So there's all these extra layers of frustration they're going through and just uncertainty in their own lives. So let me talk about a few recommendations here. We're just going to recap. And I see some questions sitting in the queue. So give me just a moment and I'm going to get to some of those. I see some comments and questions. So remember, right, it's really not about what is changing, but who needs to adapt to that change. Expect resistance. Like, point blank, expect resistance. We are human beings. Human beings don't like to be told what to do, right? So when you expect that resistance and you can counteract that up front by showing that empathetic side of you, like, hey, we understand that you're going through a lot and we want to help you. It's immediately going to alleviate some of that resistance. It's all about how you approach it, right? Pushing people versus pulling them into the change. Make sure you understand your users' change culture and their receptiveness to change. Make sure you're looking at it from the user's needs, not the business decision makers approach, right? That used car salesman. Make sure you're setting goals. Make sure you have those, again, those small smart goals, but bigger milestones so that you can celebrate along the way towards your bigger vision. Make sure you're communicating, early and often. Bring users along on the journey so that your user readiness plan should be done in parallel with your with the change, right? So it's the change and the who's changing, the what and the who should be planned together, not one after the fact. Make sure you're planned for unplanned changes. This is a big one, right? COVID is an unplanned change that nobody could have imagined or prepared for. I did a webinar a couple weeks ago on operating at the speed of change, and there's a whole section in there on how to plan for unplanned changes. It's now available as a recording. So if you're interested in that, you can go back and take a look at that recording. I'll point you to that. And then make sure you have a plan to support your users, right? Not just when you launch the change, but before, during, and after. Really important to make users feel welcome. All right, let me stop here. I'm just going to look at the questions queue. This one came in earlier. I think I saw this one pop up right when I was doing the fad diet. Someone said, my company is on the other end of the spectrum. They don't like to change at all, and we're living in the past. And they said it's always an uphill battle to get IT to change anything. And we have the mentality that as soon as our office doors can open, it's back to business as usual, meaning in the past. So this is a big one. I can't tell you how many companies I've heard say, as soon as our office doors open, it's back to the way we were. We don't work from home. Not our culture, right? Back to the way we were. And it's kind of, if it's not broken, don't fix it. And I actually worked with recently, this week, I was on a call with a customer who had that. They said, we've been doing it this way for 20 years. And my response to them, because I am very matter of fact, I said, you know what? I said 20 years ago, we didn't have cell phones and core communication was through fax machines. I'm like, so are you willing to give up your cell phones and go back to fax machines versus chat? And he was like, well, of course not. And I'm like, well, see, I'm like, things need to change, right? It was kind of that eye opener to get them to think about that. And the other example, just because I love analogies, the other example I talked him through and I said, look at it this way. If you have a car that's from, 1990, right? It's a car, it's, 20 whatever years old. Excuse me. And you're thinking, well, it's not broken. Why would I go get a new car? This one's not broken. But then you look at the amount of maintenance that you spend every year to keep it going and the fact that it's not as fuel efficient. It's not good for the environment anymore. It doesn't get that many miles per gallon. So you're constantly putting more gas in it than you would if you had a newer car. So just because it's not broken doesn't mean it's efficient, right? So it's really getting users to see, and whatever approach is right, to position to your leadership team, of getting them to see, what your competitors are going to pass you by. People are now saying, look, I like working from home. I want that flexibility. And if you don't give it to them, they're going to go find a company who does. right? So it's really about looking at the current state versus automatically going back to what worked 6 months ago. Someone's saying, can you present this presentation to my manager, pretty please? You know what? I love doing this kind of stuff. It's, it's fun for me. And the next couple of slides, I'll share my contact information. So you contact me, happy to talk, to you offline and better understand what you're trying to do here. And see how we can help. Someone saying, I attended your last webcast and started implementing your change preparedness plan. We never thought to put together a contingency plan because we never could have imagined something like COVID hitting. Thanks for the idea. Yeah, so again, that was something I talked about before, a change preparedness plan. It's kind of like your emergency kit, right? You go camping or you live in hurricane zone and you have your emergency kit. I think every organization should have that for an unplanned change. And I talk about that in my other webinar. So thanks for that. Thanks for letting me know. Yes, my company is very data driven. Okay, so this goes back to the example we were just talking about. If we don't have a number to put alongside a metric, they don't care. How can I get them to look at the other 90%, as you put it? So this goes back to really helping them to see that it's the people that make or break your organization. So it's not about a technology. Technology is really just a means to an end. The big thing I try to do is meet them where they are, because again, nobody likes to change, and just like a user would push back on change, this is why your business decision makers are also pushing back on change, because you're trying to push something else on them that they're not ready to hear. So you really have to meet them where they are. What is important to them? Is it security, right? Is it the money, right? Understand what's important to them and help them to see how focusing on the people is really going to help accelerate getting them where they want to go. All right, so again, kind of it's meeting them where they are. I don't know your exact circumstance, but those are just some suggestions to help them to see it's about the people. It's you have to meet them where they are and then get them to where you want to go. Same concept of selling a user on the value of change. You're just selling your IT staff or your BDM on the value of change. So keep in mind, right, there's a lot going on right now. People are dealing with so much change, but every single change has one common denominator, and it is the people. Right? Technology is just a means to an end. The change itself, sometimes we can't always control the change, like a COVID situation, right? We can't always control what happens to us, but we can help control how we react to it. And the emotional side of it is going to take over. So the more you can tap into that, the more you can be empathetic, the more you can focus on the people, the better you're going to be, both initially and in the long run. So for that gentleman who said, hey, can you present this? My contact information is there. We always offer, complimentary consultations and workshops. So feel free to reach out if you want to talk about this offline. Visit my website, Iceberg Consulting Services. That's where you'll find that other webinar about that emergency preparedness, that operating at the speed of change, which you can view offline. And then lastly, would love your feedback on what you thought about this session. We're just about to wrap things up. I think I got through all the questions. Feel free, aka.my/webinar feedback. Give me some feedback. I understand spending an hour is a lot of time. That was one of the pieces of feedback I heard last time. So after this webinar, what I'm actually going to be doing is launching a YouTube channel instead of doing these hour-long sessions, and they're going to be bite-sized pieces of information. So working on all those videos now. Check out my website, and in a couple of weeks, I hope to have the first few videos up and running, and they'll be really focused on little bits of information about tips for driving change within your organization, so that you can view those on your own, and they'll only be 5 to 7 minutes, so I'm not asking you to spend a full hour. But you can always reach out to me, my email, through my website, and take things forward. So with that, we are at the top of the hour. So I do want to thank everyone for joining me today and for your feedback and your insights. It's pretty common. Oh, I had a poll. I forgot to put in a poll. Let me see. I'm going to throw this up if anyone's, for those folks that are still on. I would love to understand. I'll launch that here on your screen. I would love to understand if there was one of those that you related to more than the other. Used car salesman. I see a lot of used car salesmen coming in. Used car salesmen, fad diet. Oh, someone's typing in the chat. Oh, someone's saying all of the above, a little of each. Yeah, this poll doesn't give you the option of selecting more than one. So used car salesman is a big one. Yeah, that is big. I said that before too. It's one of the popular ones that I see as well. All right, I'm going to go ahead and close the poll. And with that, we are going to go ahead and wrap things up. Thank you again, everyone, for spending an hour of your day with me. Have a fabulous day and a great summer. And we hope to see you again soon. Thanks. Bye.